Thank you. I am that person, so this is me. Good morning. I am Marie Trottier. I am from TSA headquarters near Washington, D.C., and I wish to thank Connect Thrive Summit for inviting me to be with all of you here today. This is my first time, obviously, at Connect Thrive, and what an amazing experience it has been for me so far. And since TSA was stood up just over 20 years ago, after 9/11, listening and engaging with Barbara this morning in terms of the One Pulse Foundation and Pulse, and unfortunately what our bruised and battered country has gone through these past few weeks with all of these mass shootings. Who would ever imagine that 20 years after 9/11, 6 years after Pulse, that we would still be having such horrific situations in our country today. So again, let's talk about America's need to be screened by Transportation Security Administration. We do screen over 2 million people a day at the 450 airports across the country. We do recognize the concerns that members of the transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming traveling public have with screening technology and certain screening procedures. We are committed to ensuring that all travelers are treated with respect and dignity. And so again, we've had some recent announcements, and this is why I don't have a slide deck, because of the fact that these things are in place and in play right now with things happening. We utilize, because of the White House's support and the Department of Homeland Security and the White House Domestic Policy Council's support, we used March 31st, the Transgender Day of Visibility, or TDOV, to make these announcements. We announced improvements for screening transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming airline passengers to enhance the screening experiences for all passengers. We're we identified this opportunity to improve the advanced imaging technology. That is the little machine that you walk into with the yellow footprints, you put your arms up and it spins around. We're working with the manufacturer on algorithm updates that will increase the accuracy and the efficiency. By replacing the current gender-based AIT system, and again, a binary gender-based AIT system, this new, more accurate technology will also advance civil rights and improve the customer experience of all travelers who previously have been required to undergo additional screening due to alarms in sensitive body areas. We received almost $19 million in funding within this fiscal year's omnibus appropriation to complete the development, testing, and deployment of these algorithm updates for the AIT units. Upon completion of successful testing, we will begin deploying the updates to airports later this year. What we also wish to do is to reduce the number of pat-down screenings on actual people. We've updated our standard operating procedures, and again, it's appropriate that you titled my session Alphabet Soup, because our standard operating procedures are SOPs for the Transportation Security Officers, known as TSOs, to permit less invasive screening procedures for certain passengers who trigger the AIT scanner in a sensitive body area. The change will reduce pat-downs for TSOs and the traveling public without compromising security, and will be in effect until the new gender-neutral AIT technology is deployed later this calendar year. Streamlining identity validation. In February of this year, we updated the checkpoint standard operating procedure to remove gender considerations with validating a traveler's identification at airport security checkpoints. When travelers appear at the travel document checker, the TDC, that's the first place where you hand over your ID and your paper boarding pass or your mobile boarding pass for identity verification, gender information is irrelevant in determining that traveler may proceed into the screening area. So that is that is absolutely significant, and especially in terms of changing gender markers and everything else. Also, I'm fully aware, because of doing this specific work for TSA, in terms of having officers call out dead names and other situations as well. We heard yesterday about the X gender marker on passports. We're making TSA PreCheck more inclusive, and we're updating that to include an X gender marker. Once the necessary software is complete, applicants will have the option to select X as an alternative gender category. So beginning just about 2 months ago in April of this year, we started to allow TSA enrollees, current TSA PreCheck members, to select their gender based on self-attestation, regardless of the gender on the person's identification card. So current PreCheck members certainly will be able to make that change now. Changing a gender association in TSA PreCheck will have no effect on a member's expedited screening when arriving at the TSA checkpoint. So if you have TSA PreCheck, or if you have CBP's global entry, which gives you TSA PreCheck, then you will be able to certainly be able to make that change without any issue. Improving communication with the traveling public. Recently, we updated the transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming passengers webpage on tsa.gov to provide information to the traveling public on all gender-related updates, including changes to the AIT screening protocols, identity verification processes, and the TSA PreCheck program, as well as links to relevant sites for more comprehensive customer service information. We also have a program called TSA Cares, where travelers can call in advance for individualized assistance at the checkpoint. We're currently updating that page to ensure that travelers requiring individual assistance receive the latest guidelines and guidance in line with security procedures, as well as any information regarding how to request assistance on the date of travel. We are also expanding airline partnerships to enhance the overall traveler experience. Like so many here this weekend, we have several stakeholder relationships outside of our agency, certainly interagency as well as private and public. As of March 31st, 2 major domestic carriers offered X or U for undisclosed as gender markers on their travel reservation systems. A 3rd airline will offer the same later this year. Most of the remaining domestic carriers apply gender changes upon request through their customer contact centers. We continue to work closely with the air carriers across the nation to promote the use and acceptance of the X gender marker. In 2020, in actually August of 2020, TSA launched the Inclusion Action Committee, or IAC. It was an executive priority, and this was to review the agency's internal and external policies, practices, and procedures, and to make recommendations for improvement. This task force has been instrumental in helping to expedite various efforts throughout TSA that directly benefit minority and LGBTQ+ communities. And one of the individual items that is in my portfolio and my area of responsibility is I'm the person on behalf of the agency who engages with all of the LGBTQ+ organizations throughout the country. I also do look at, if I'm not directly involved with, I also am reviewing and involved with every transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming civil rights complaint that comes through, just in terms of having the most expertise and the most bandwidth in this area. It is all a work in progress. We've done great things, but there's always so much more to do. And certainly we are enhancing better practices, and like for me, the fact that perfection is never there, I don't believe we're ever going to be to best practices, but we want to continually improve those better practices. So thank you for allowing me to be here this morning, and that's going to end my formal remarks. Thank you.
So I've been looking forward to this conversation for some time now. Honestly, thank you for
Hold
being
on,
here.
this is a little bit more difficult getting down.
All right.
Okay.
Got you. Thank you. Have a seat, please. So your job is, the scope of your job, that you are the point person for basically any DEI issue having to do with TSA, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
Okay.
My bad.
No, so a little bit of a distinction there is I am the person who connects with all of the civil rights communities except for disability. So I do race, religion, gender. I have a colleague who does the disability and medical condition side. But obviously I've been at TSA now 6.5 years, and the increase in, the appropriate increase in attention and visibility for the LGBTQ plus community, because it was something that I worked on in my previous academic professional life. It's something that was of great interest to me. So, and again, the Tribal Affairs Liaison piece is something that I do on behalf of the entire agency, because there's a government-to-government responsibility with all tribal nations throughout the United States. But that's not why we're here today.
But I appreciate the scope of your job is, it's stunning to me. Can you also give us a little more, you told me yesterday, but your background before TSA?
Sure. So I was at Harvard University for more than 2 decades in the President and Provost's office, where I was the Chief Accessibility Officer. So I was doing all the Section 504 and ADA pieces, and Section 504 is the big teeth regulations and laws from 1977, because any program, and program is an entity, whether it's a university or government agency or whatever, that receives federal funding. And obviously Harvard University receives hundreds of $millions in federal financial aid, as well as grants and everything for the research that they're doing. So they're obligated to make all programs accessible to people with disabilities. So I did that for more than 2 decades.
So you have been conversant in this space for most of your professional career, I guess.
For many decades, David.
Okay.
Yes, I am that old. Exactly, for many decades. No, but that's also what I loved about this job, because I always want to be challenged. Always want to be challenged in terms of my brain and like my passion, my heart, my soul, everything else was, because I did accessibility and disability compliance for 25 years, now doing everything else, is that situation of because, I am that person that now I'm getting to have this depth and breadth. And also because we're not one of something. We're not one of something in terms of that piece. We're not, just a man or just a woman or just, non-binary or just whatever. We also have, a race. We also have ethnicity. We have national origin. We have, religion or don't. In that situation. So in that piece, and certainly whether you have a disability, from birth, like someone like myself who has a genetic, mutation from a recessive gene, or in terms of acquiring a disability, or certainly with baby boomers. Why is AARP so big and so famous? Because individuals who are over the age of 50 or 60 are acquiring impairments that may lead to the level of disability for the rest of their lives. In your position, it's about stakeholders. And I was just listening and thinking how many different up and down stakeholders you're dealing with. So clearly in this TSA position, you deal directly with airports, with airlines, with local governments, with federal governments, with state agencies, with international. That sounds like an endless parade of stakeholders. How do you rank them, and which ones are you working with most closely? Every day is different.
Yeah.
Every day is different. So it depends. And I'll just give you an example. Last weekend was a holiday weekend, but like many of us in this room, my work iPhone is always on and within close proximity, whether I'm traveling or in my house, whatever. And last Saturday morning, I received 3 messages on LinkedIn that there was an issue that needed to be addressed with a traveler at Portland International Airport that happened to be the chief of a tribal nation. So again, I literally fired up my TSA laptop and got online and emailed the tribal chief right away, because he had already posted to social media and everything else. But that's me. It's not my management. That's who I am, because that's how I live my life. And that's how I want to be treated in life. So therefore, I'm going to treat everybody else that way.
Wow. Please. It's funny, and what led to this discussion was I was at a different conference where there was a session basically people just really coming down hard on TSA and them being not. And I said that to you yesterday, and you said we deserve in the past a lot of criticism because we weren't doing it right. That was something that you said to me. What are you doing? Is it true that on the current or the previous machines when we went through, that the operator of TSA had to choose a pink or a blue button, whether it was male or female?
That's still in place today.
Still in place.
That's right. So that's exactly it. If you're going into the AIT, so that is the large tubular machine, that, right, in that situation. So if you're not pre-checked, you're going through that machine, then that is literally, it is binary. The officer, and again, so it's one of those situations that I would say that, TSA with the TSA with the general public is one of the least favorite agencies, and we understand that. I mean, we certainly understand that. And when you're talking about screening 2 million people a day at 450 airports across the country, but I will also say our officers, our front line, have the toughest jobs in our agency. I mean, there are 45,000 of them. I mean, what they have to learn, what they have to know, and literally they're, and every member of the public is every member of the public. And so, again, I mean, the other thing I will say, David, is that this is part of where we're trying to get better because the general public needs to go to tsa.gov. I mean, you need to know that, yes, you can carry stuffing, on the plane and through TSA for Thanksgiving weekend, with family in Omaha, but you also need to know what you can't travel with, or even with, with the fact that you can do stuffing, but you might not be able to do gravy because of the liquid type of situation. And I'm giving everyday examples, versus underserved and civil rights examples, just to make a point, because, and certainly with COVID, we've lost officers. We've had staffing shortages, like everybody has. We've talked here about numbers of jobs open and job applicants and whatever. And so that's it. But they have incredibly difficult jobs for what they have to learn and know and remember. And not every member of the public is respectful or appropriate with our officers as well.
No, I mean, just the fact they have to stand there where people take off their shoes all day long. And I'm not joking. I mean, just what they have to, and the level of responsibility placed on their shoulder to get it right every time. One time they don't get it right, it could change everything. So I think the pressure is there. I think you have, going back, you said they're changing the algorithm on those machines, so you really won't have to choose a gender as someone comes through, walk through.
Well, right. I mean, again, the hope is that it will be an algorithm change that in that situation that it would be much more, gender neutral. Right?
Okay.
Exactly. And because that's still in development, like I said,
Right.
Hopefully I'll get to see all of you again at some point and talk about what we've done and what it has rolled out, but that's the thing. And it's also the same thing, too, that I just want to add here is, and some of you, we've had this casual conversation since we've met here this weekend, is we're aviation security, but we're also very much a lot of former military, police, security. So we are very much an agency of ma'ams and sirs. And it's like pre-pandemic, when I would drive to my office, into the garage, whatever else, I would be called ma'am at least 7 times by 7 different security, members of personnel before I even got to my office. And so again, in that situation, part of it is the culture shift that we need to change in that way. And so we're going through those standard operating procedures in terms of the Civil Rights Office. Again, not just me individually, but a number of people, to remove the gendering. So to remove the gendering in there, that, if we can just put, they, them, or there, or any individual or whatever, and get rid of those things. And it's the same way, too, that we just, for our office, when we are sending out letters from our assistant administrator, who's the highest person, over me in the Civil Rights Office, we remove honorifics. We remove the Mr. and Mrs. and those kinds of things, and it's, just dear, John Doe, Jane Doe type of situation.
And you handle personally the civil rights complaints, correct?
Yeah, I mean, not just me, there's a whole
Right.
team of people,
Right.
but I'm the one, I mean, first of all, as the tribal affairs liaison, so they handle them as the primary. I'm always involved as a secondary in that situation, and also for the LGBTQIA+, but I will also say to you that, if there's anything that is high profile or high visibility, we had a situation with a transgender traveler in March of 2021 that, had posted to Instagram or TikTok. I forget because people post to so many different things, but there were 20 million views within like 1 or 2 days. So the agency designated me to be the person to reach out to that individual and have the conversation and go from there.
What is the volume? I mean, can you just give me an estimate, the volume of complaints, actual civil rights?
I mean, it's actually very small.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, and so I will say too that the actual number of complaints is very small compared to the passenger volume, and that's why again, I don't want to talk about that metric, or that metric for me is not important because it's the individual experiences. But the situations that do go to social media or to Congress and senators, and more importantly, the organizations that I engage with regularly. So National Center for Transgender Equality, Lambda Legal, Transgender Law Center, Equality Florida, and so many others, Trans Latina Coalition. So because again, we want that diversity, inclusion, and again. One of my favorite words in the world has been throughout this conference is belonging. I mean, part of it is the whole belonging situation. And a number of people, in these communities, especially the LGBTQ+ community, we know. I mean, just how, do not like TSA, do not look forward to being screened and whatever else, we understand. But given the fact that it's aviation security, we're trying to meet those needs of aviation security, but in terms of become more human in less gendering ways.
And, you said a lot of LGBTQ people don't like being screened. I don't think anybody likes being screened. Honestly, it's such an intimate thing done in public, and particularly you have to go through secondary screening, as you know. This is necessary. The part that I always come back to is the threat matrix that you guys know about on your side, and the daily changing what that means requires an agility to change, to add or subtract, because sometimes, you'll get it. I think the one thing that gets people the angriest the most quickly is inconsistency. I didn't have to do this in Dallas. Why did I have to do this in Tampa, right?
Right, and that's a great example. I mean, that's a great example. And so I think, again, those are things that, throughout the agency, when we find out those situations, we're trying to figure out, and we jump on things like that right away, like, okay, did Dallas have a policy change? Did Dallas do something? Because again, we're one agency. We are one agency in that situation, and that's part of the reason why we need to function as one agency in that way. And just in terms of, that example, and just like no one likes to be screened. Last week, I was escorting a tribal nation representative on a tribal repatriation through DCA, through Reagan. I alarmed twice. I set off the AIT, and then I set off the walk-through metal detector, which I never do. But I live in those moments of sitting there thinking, right, because as soon as, not all alarms are audible. Sometimes the machines don't alarm that you can't hear it, but the officers should show you on the yellow bounding buck. But literally what I realize, and I do pay attention to everything in my surroundings always, is that when I alarmed the AIT, literally every other passenger in that area turned around and looked at me in that situation. When then I alarmed the walk-through metal detector, it was the same thing. So, I'm trying to have that real life passenger experience, whether you're from America or any other country, in that situation, to understand, because the checkpoints are fish bowls, and there's just a lot that goes on there.
I should play the lottery because I get pulled out for the random screen. If there's someone in the line that's going to pull out for random screening, it's me. But I get it. I understand the randomness of it. I understand the algorithms. I understand the many levels that your organization knows about and has to deal with every day. And the retail version of that is what we experience at the airport. I'm impressed that the government is so intent on streamlining the process, on degendering or making it not so gender-based, and on relying on technology to make that happen. Do you have any, and if you don't, that's fine, but do you have any idea what the spending, what kind of spending, what is this costing the TSA just to do something this simple? I imagine it would be amazing.
I honestly don't know. I mean, in that situation, I don't know. I'm not part of those processes, and only because of the fact that I think, again, there are so many different departments and divisions of TSA, and this is ongoing work right now in that situation that I honestly have no clue.
You said 2 million screenings a day.
Right. I mean, we are back to pre-pandemic levels. We are over, and so again, and in my morning news clips and news briefs that I get those numbers, and certainly we wanted to see like Memorial Day weekend where it was like we screened 13 million passengers over Memorial Day weekend. I mean, and just when I stop and think, I mean that number is mind-boggling because that's over 3 million people a day if we're going Friday through Monday type situation, right?
So right now, if I heard you correctly earlier, because I'm in pre, and I love pre-check, by the way. Is there anyone here who doesn't use pre-check? Good. All right, because I was going to have her jump on you afterwards, like you can get your pre-check going.
I won't jump on you, I promise.
And clear a third party. What exactly is?
There's a third party,
Okay.
which is fine. I mean, again, it's like. Competition is fine, I mean, right, in that situation. But that's why I always say to people, if you do one international trip in the next 5 years, get CBP Global Entry, because CBP Global Entry is $100, in that situation, and you give TSA pre-check for free.
In fact, I think, Will, isn't CBP Global Entry here?
They are.
Yeah.
Because I saw the sign this morning that said to make your appointment for Global Entry, and I'm like, yes.
So you can get your...
Oh, and the other thing I do want to tell you, one other plug that I want to give is for the rest of the week of this conference, because Real ID is certainly coming in next year. My colleagues from the Real ID will be presenting this week, and so in that situation, if that impacts your business, your destinations or anything else, please certainly feel free to stop in there.
TSA Cares, I'd like to end on a little discussion of that. Could you tell us more about it? I love the idea.
So TSA Cares was started just about 12 years ago. First, really for people with disabilities and medical conditions, where you can call a specified 800 line, 855 line, and get information. You do need to call like at least 72 hours in advance because it's very, very busy. It's now open for anybody needing any additional screening or individualized help. So I recommend people who, because I obviously deal with religion and groups of religious identity. So because I work with Hindus and Sikhs and Jews and Muslims, I recommend that they all do. And again, for transgender and non-binary and gender non-conforming, I do recommend that if they're comfortable and they want to, they can call that to be able to get information in advance, which would then set up a passenger support specialist, which is an extra level of trained officer to meet them at the checkpoint and walk them through. I'm always pleased, like when I'm, to hear when I've spoken at the Southern Comfort Transgender Conference and other places, people who are able to successfully just do it on their own and appreciate it. And yes, pre-check is typically really helpful, but TSA Cares now really has evolved. So anyone needing assistance, and certainly for multi-generational families. I mean, some parents who have toddlers bathed in arms or whatever. You've got breast milk and breast pump and all kinds of things. Those things just necessary to get through.
And the Inclusion Action Committee is an ongoing thing. The
Inclusion Action Committee was, stood up in 2020, an executive priority. It's ongoing. I mean, their significant report, went forward, and so now we're seeing the product of that in terms of things happening. And what I love for this is it's internal. I mean, certainly for the employees as well as external for public facing. Because of the fact that we literally do impact the lives of more than 2 million members of the traveling public every day, it's incredibly important because just in the 6.5 years that I've been at TSA, I've reworked so many things. I mean, and even the situation of like the transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming page, which I was just really instrumental in, drafting and working on, and working with a whole team of, public affairs and operations and others. I mean, that's been updated twice now in the time that I've been here. So again, it's always a situation, and I've heard it throughout this weekend too, of having the flexibility and having living documents. And when something significant happens, you can make those changes and do those updates.
That's impressive, and to have you here to articulate everything that TSA is doing to the traveling public at large. If you wanted the traveling public at large to know one thing about TSA right now, what would that be?
I actually want to leave them with three things. First of all, it's a situation of look at TSA.gov. And again, and yes, again, as a woman with a disability in that situation, whether you choose to self-identify or out yourself is your role and your right and everything else. But just in terms of think about it, look at TSA.gov, look at what the options are to make informed decisions in that situation. Also, if something does go wrong, people who are LGBTQ+ are protected by civil rights laws, federal civil rights laws. Please file a complaint. Please file a complaint because we can't fix, what we don't know. Again, someone here, shared a situation with me this weekend already in terms of somebody who, where an officer, and again, in terms of a non-traditional parental situation of like two moms or two dads or whatever. And I work on those too, and I'm also working on a lot of scenarios and training dealing with transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming children traveling with parents or adults, and also transracial children as well for all of those reasons. But it's important because when an officer says or does something that is disrespectful from the get-go to any human being, so David and I start speaking with each other in a disrespectful way from the most human level in that piece, then it also is going to escalate depending on what our own identity is in terms of those pieces. And then I think the other situation is, as well, is if there are things that I need to know, in terms of your communities, your population, or even a specific airport. Again, it's an honor to have Tampa International, introduce me because I work with Tampa a lot because the Florida airports are so busy. But the airport authorities are, incredible stakeholders to us. But if there's TSA specifically at a certain airport that's not doing things well, that you can identify, and identify it to me like in your own words. An email is just really great to say, these things are happening. And again, a sidebar to this, but with the refugees and the asylum seekers and those kinds of things, I've been working on that because of the government documents that CBP releases them with, and then getting them through TSA. And so I work with all of the NGOs around the country, getting through airports in Texas and other places. But when somebody's telling me something specific is happening at an airport, we're going to get that. I'm going to get that information from you. I'm going to formulate an email to my leadership, who's then going to take it up to the operations leadership, and we're going to do an agency-wide response to that. And I will also get back to you, thank you for bringing me that to my attention on behalf of TSA, but now we're going to be able to facilitate change for all the right reasons.
Yeah, and something tells me you will answer every email there. And your quote I'm going to throw back at you because I wrote it down. We are not one of something. There's so much depth in that. It's going to take me a week to take that down. We forgot to mention her fun fact, and we're going to end with her fun fact. She had her dinner party guests. If she were to have a dinner party of anybody, it would be Cleopatra, Marie Antoinette, Madame Marie Curie, Jane Austen, and Eleanor Roosevelt. If I'm invited, I will bring the stuffing. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you.